Just await confirmation of that.
That's all up and running, is it? Can I have the apologies?
Just awaiting a message on that, Chairman.
Oh, sorry. Yes, we'll wait for the message.
And we're now live and broadcasting.
Thank you very much. Welcome everybody to the Cabinet Advisory Subcommittee on Economic Growth and Recovery annual meeting. First of all, apologies for absence. Have we got any apologies at all?
Keith, I've heard from Judith Wareski. She's slightly unwell, so she sends her apologies, but she potentially might be able to join, but she just wanted me to let you know that she might not be joining us. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Declarations of interest. The same declarations of interest apply as normal. Minutes of the previous meeting, which was held significant amount of time ago, 22nd of October 2019. I presume that you're all happy with the minutes. They've been checked, and so we'll take that as read.
Yes.
There are no deputations. I have got no chairman's announcement to make, apart from saying obviously this meeting was originally intended to take place in the autumn, but as a result of the situation regarding COVID-19, it had to be delayed on a couple of occasions. So this is really the 2020 meeting, and we'll try to hold another AGM in 2021 rather than 2022. And then I think we move straight on after that. I've got item 6, is that correct? Am I saying the right things? This is the Economic Development Annual Report. And I think, Richard, you're going to briefly cover that, are you? Or is Stuart covering it?
No,
no, I'm very happy to let Richard cover this, leader, if I may, and just for any member colleagues who haven't met Richard Kenny yet, Richard joined us in January as our new interim assistant director for economic development. So, but with that, if I can hand over to Richard to just very briefly introduce the report, leader.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so the annual report really covers a period of time which has been one hell of a year, I think, a year of complete uncertainty in terms of both the pandemic itself and in terms of the Brexit transition. So I think that has impacted hugely in terms of the activities of the economic development team. All I would really say is that the focus has been obviously in terms of responding to the crisis, in terms of supporting businesses and employees, and obviously it covers a range of successes that we've seen over that period as well, in terms of the Gulf Stream, in terms of Fawley Waterside, and in terms of the Ocean Infinities Armada in particular. You've all had the report in advance, so I don't really envisage any real need to go into a lot of detail about the specifics, other than to say that obviously, you know, the work over this period was led by David Fletcher and the economic development team. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. One figure that was struck me was the £410 million of support businesses have had as a result of COVID. It just shows you how the different amounts add up over the year. Fine, okay, have we got any comments on the report? All happy with it? Is that Rob saying, wanting to say?
I was trying to, I put the wrong hand up. I wasn't actually waving at you.
Holding your chair.
I put the wrong hand up. Although I'm happy to wave, you know, whatever. It was really just to ask Richard a question. Having had a few discussions with Transport for South East and looking across the South East generally, I didn't know just your opinion on it. I think it's generally accepted in the past that whenever we've gone through the sort of issue, well, not a pandemic, but clearly recessions, we tend to be hit hardest first in the South East, but we tend to recover more quickly. And I don't know if that's something you just want to comment on. I mean, I don't know what the reason for that is, but generally we seem to have a quicker recovery rate. And I'm just thinking about how we're funded and how we look at everything, including transport and just that sort of that green recovery, whether that will affect that change of rate of recovery.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Humby. Yeah, all I would say is absolutely right. And we were hit. The economy in Hampshire went into freefall for the first 6 months of the year, but then went on to recover more quickly. So absolutely right. And I think it's possibly a sign of the fact that the stronger the economy, the more the impact is felt initially. Than perhaps otherwise it would be. So I think that is something for us to bear in mind, and it will be interesting to see how the bounce back plays into this, because there's a lot of talk at the moment, and I'll go on to this in the next item, but there is a lot of talk about this sort of K-shaped recovery where the sort of knowledge intensive economy and professionals are seemingly doing well out of the opportunities that arise from the structural shifts that are taking place in the economy, in terms of more online commerce and in terms of people working more from home, whereas the more marginalised are suffering the consequences of that. But in terms of moving forward, I think it's going to be really important, both in terms of the pandemic and in terms of Brexit, that the South makes its case, both as part of levelling up, because levelling up isn't just about a north-south divide or the broad geography that we often talk about in terms of the north-south divide. There are divisions within cities, within towns and everything else. But also in terms of Brexit, I think the government needs to keep an eye on the competitiveness of the UK and how it finds its way in the world in terms of utilising its investment and trade opportunities in the international gateway that we have here in South Hampshire.
I think, if I may, Chairman, come back a little bit on that. That was part of the reason for the question, and I'm sure you'll cover some of these in your slides later. But it was the fact that the investment in the South East, if we do recover more quickly, 2 areas in the country put money in the pot, with London and the South East, and how important it is that we do get that investment in the South East to help the whole country recover more quickly, effectively. Thank you, Keith.
Okay, any other comments? Steve?
Yeah, I was just going to say how pleased I was with paragraph 9, which refers to Southampton Airport being particularly hard hit as a result of the Flybe collapse and then the downturn in the economy. And I agree absolutely that the pending planning application is critical. And then, assuming that that is passed, I would like us to be part of a very positive programme to see the airport regenerated.
As you would expect, I entirely agree with you on that point. I think at the moment the planning decision is going to be taken, is it next month, unless it's kicked further down the road?
I believe at the moment it's envisaged to be in March, Leader, yes.
Yeah. Okay, if there's nothing else, you are happy with the recommendation at para 3, I presume?
Yes.
If you're not, put your hand up or clap or something.
Thank you.
Right, moving on. Item 7, economic recovery update. And again, Stuart, is Richard doing this or you doing this?
You're on mute, Stuart.
My apologies, that's the first time for me today as well, but yeah, Richard's actually going to take us through this item,
Yeah.
Leader.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Leader. Yes, so I've got some slides to share that I think have been circulated, so I will endeavour to get those up on my screen.
If you can't do it, we should all have those if we've got more than one computer.
Yeah. I've certainly got mine up on the screen, Leader. I don't know if
Yeah, I've got mine.
Or Roz has.
So if you have any trouble, Richard, let us know and we can just talk. You can just talk through them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've brought up the presentation.
Has that come up on your screens now? Or?
We haven't got it up on the main screen, but we've got it up on our other screen, if you like, or I have. So if you want to talk through the slides, we can just wind them up as you go along. If you've got them yourself.
Yes. Yeah, I've got them. I've got them myself. I'm just surprised that they haven't managed to make it up on your screen, having gone through this several times earlier. But obviously they haven't done that. Okay, well I'll talk to the slides, and hopefully you'll be able to follow through with me which slide I'm on. So apologies for that, but I'm just moving into the second slide now, which is titled "Moving Out of Response Towards Recovery." And I think what I would like to say really is, we're not yet into a sustainable recovery. We are still in response, but hopefully, given the route map that was released on Monday, we seem to be getting a signal that hopefully we will be entering into a more sustainable recovery moving forward. I want to cover 5 areas. Basically, just to go over the macroeconomic shock and just recognise the scale of the impact that COVID has had on the economy, the impact also that has rippled through into Hampshire, which looks to be impacting around sort of 6 to 7 billion in GVA in terms of the reduction in the size of the economy. The shape of that response in terms of the bridge that we've been building with the help of resources both from central government and elsewhere, and how that's been implemented, and how that bridge is then deconstructed so that job losses and closures are minimised, so that the removal, the weaning off of that support for businesses and employees is worked through in a way which minimises the impact on jobs and business closures. And then I also want to cover the shape of the recovery in terms of some of the structural shifts, and the fact that very quickly those structural shifts may get overtaken by the forces of the bounce back in terms of moving back to business as usual. And I think we need to really reflect on that, because I think small interventions now could make big changes over the long term in terms of how we finally pull together all of the pieces of the puzzle into our recovery strategy as we move forward. I'm now moving on to the next slide. Yeah, and very quickly, just to really say that the continuing scale and resilience of uncertainty is still with us. That stems from both COVID and the trade deal that we've struck in terms of the impact of Brexit. So moving on to the sort of global picture, 8 trillion of lost output in the world economy, the largest economic contraction for over 300 years. The national economy now 10% smaller over the year, with a growth forecast for 2021 to probably only pull back 5.4% growth. So still quite some way to go before we start to get back onto the path of recovery. And as the OBR, central forecast has told us, really right from the outset that, a forecast that suggests that the economy by 24-25 probably about 3% smaller than it currently is. Still a big hit, but nevertheless, a clear trajectory towards recovery. And then I think something to say probably about unemployment legacy and the fact that by the end of 2021, we're still going to be over 6.7% unemployment. So throughout the coming year, some big issues around shakeout and economic scar. I'm moving on to the next slide. As has already been mentioned in the questions earlier, the economy really in free fall for the first 6 months in Hampshire. potentially lost in terms of GVA somewhere between 6 and 7 billion in GVA, so a significant impact. I'm going to move on to the next slide. So the overall impact for the calendar year for December, the economy down by minus 9.1%. But as suggested on the previous slide, it could have been higher than that, and noticeably seeing some growth in the month of December. Moving on to the next slide. I think the key thing here in terms of business activity is that only 2/3 of businesses are trading in terms of where we are now, as measured in late December, of which a third, which is a very large number, on a cliff edge, having less than 3 months or no cash reserves in their position. So really a question for many, really concerned about survival more than survival getting back into stabilisation. So nowhere near really recovering at this stage for many of our businesses. Moving on to the next slide. I don't know if you caught it, but yesterday's national unemployment figures showed a 5-year high. 3/5 of those are young people, workers in hospitality, leisure, and non-supermarket retail particularly hit hardest. And also the data is showing us that those older workers, sort of the category aged between 55 and 59, also hit relatively hard in terms of the impact of the pandemic. Moving on, really just to say in terms of recruitment, labour demand is still heavily subdued. So, useful for us to note that. In terms of numbers, in terms of jobs directly supported by government, you can see there the extent that furlough has helped in terms of bridging the gap. And as I said earlier, really important that we try to make sure that bridge leads businesses straight into recovery, and that we minimise the impact as we wean people off business support and so on. The next slide, which is the sector differentiated impact. I'm not really going to go into this because I think you all will know, what the pattern of this has been. But obviously, hospitality and leisure being hit particularly hard compared to some of the more resilient sectors. So I think in terms of recovery response, we do need to think carefully about how we respond with a sector lens, in terms of looking at particular activity and support, dedicated support for tourism and hospitality moving forward, and how we respond to that. As I mentioned, tourism and hospitality, only a third of businesses currently trading in this sector at the moment. So again, survival is a major issue, even though there is light at the end of the tunnel at the moment in terms of coming out of the pandemic. So again, I think the recovery strategy perhaps needs, a dedicated effort in this space. The cruise sector, has witnessed huge financial losses, but in terms of some of the conversations that I've been having, there is a view that the cruise market could return relatively strongly, and there are signs now that there could be quite an early start in terms of re-kickstarting the market in the UK, and also I suppose just to mention that the new cruise terminal, the 55 million investment, is still well in hand and moving forward and going ahead. So I think probably some optimism that there will be some bounce back in that particular sector. Ports also been hit hugely hard, up to 50% reductions in freight volumes, big impact in terms of automotive, and obviously also big impacts in terms of on ExxonMobil in terms of their reduction in volumes at 25%. But interestingly, again, a view, from within the market that talking to people like ABP and so on, saying that the bounce back is actually likely to be strong once we get up and running, and actually, the port traffic could double relatively quickly. And we may start seeing issues in terms of the space that we need to accommodate requirements relating to growth in automotive. Aviation, as has already been mentioned, the runway extension at Southampton is critical in terms of its future moving forward, so that it can deal with the consequences of the Flybe collapse pre-lockdown. I think the key issue really is getting into that market of the 320s and the 737s, enabling the opportunities around new opportunities and new negotiations with some of the other airlines, and that runway extension being able to extend the nature of the market within which Southampton can operate. I think also fair to say that if we are, in terms of our ambitions, in terms of a world-class marine and maritime economy, it's really important that we, hold on to all our key assets in terms of the growth and development that will flow from that, in terms of the opportunities that will arise. So I think the airport's connectivity is really important. Moving on into the shape of the response, which obviously is very critical. There's been a lot of comments from businesses at the moment for continuation of support through business rates and VAT reduction, and a flexible furlough if furlough is to end in April. So I think how we manage the bridge is absolutely fundamental. As was said earlier, when you do look at the scale of the business grants that have been distributed, 377.9 million, is a sizable chunk of contribution and intervention that has probably prevented a much bigger disaster happening in terms of the economic impacts. I'm moving on to the next slide, which is headed announcements. Just to say really that certain things have been announced in terms of the comprehensive spending review that will be really important moving forward. The 4 billion levelling up fund, the 260 million for transformative digital infrastructure programmes, and the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. Other additional support has been identified, as is mentioned on the slide, in terms of the 4.6 billion grants to support businesses and protect jobs, and the one-off 9,000 per property top-up for grants for retail, hospitality and leisure, and the 594 million discretionary fund to support other businesses. We've got the budget coming on March the 3rd, which I think will be very significant, and hopefully either then or soon after, some announcements about the future of the Shared Prosperity Fund, and hopefully some opportunities for us to plan our recovery and have a revenue stream to support those developments. And obviously, of course, also important for us is the expected or anticipated Freeport bid announcements that hopefully we will be successful on. Moving on. So fairly obvious to all of us probably that the consequences of all the intervention is that tax revenues are falling, public spending increasing, 280 billion spent at national levels. So we've got big issues around in terms of the budget deficit and in terms of the government debt, with the OBR central scenario suggesting that government debt could be at 105% plus of GDP at the end of 2021. It was at about 80% going into the pandemic. So some big significant issues there in terms of future funding and tax increases potentially on the horizon. So, obviously important for us to think about, but perhaps not as structurally significant as what happened in terms of the 2008 financial crisis, where there was a lot of housing debt and structural issues that meant that the recovery was very slow. Moving on into sort of our local response to date, which needs to be factored into the recovery plan moving forward. The two LEPs have obviously made a contribution, EM3 particularly around big green and a digital focus, and I think Solent in terms of marine and maritime in particular, and mention there made of the 5th cruise terminal at the port of Southampton. Moving on, we've seen over the year, stay local campaigning. Next slide, unlocking summer campaign with support from the Cabinet Office and various others. And then on to the 45 million investment in terms of the Gulf Stream. Next slide. And really just to say that obviously impacted by COVID, but and operating on a skeleton staff at the moment with furloughed staff and all the rest of it working from home, but with forecasts that suggest that the recovery and bounce back will be relatively positive. Again, in terms of the robotic ships and the Ocean Infinity Armada, some real opportunities there for us in terms of moving forward. Also impacted, but again, one of our successes in terms of building on for the recovery. And next slide, Forley Waterside, obviously with the planning application going in July 2020, and real opportunities, I think, to develop that marine and maritime economy, to develop real innovation hub, the big housing development in terms of the numbers of houses and in terms of the number of jobs that flow from that. That is a really big significant priority for us moving forward, and clearly it may be impacted in terms of confidence and in terms of access to finance, but hopefully it will be a key centerpiece of the recovery. And then into the next slide, which is just to reference Hampshire 2050, which is our place-based initiative and getting the Hampshire story and the foundations of our Hampshire story right, a key integral part of our agenda moving forwards. And we've got events planned both in March and May, with a big launch in May, hopefully to some big stakeholders, both inside of Hampshire and outside and across the private and public sector, including hopefully officials and ministers from government. So a really good story to tell and some great foundations and evidence on which to build a recovery strategy moving forwards. And then on to the next slide, which is really key, I think, for us is the shape of that recovery. As I've mentioned, the pulling up of the drawbridge, the ending of business support and the furlough scheme, and the acceleration of trends, I think, which are opportunities as well as threats. The digital and the automation and the green trends that are moving forward are actually probably accelerated the pace of change, sort of change that we've probably seen over 10 years, we're seeing happen very quickly indeed. And I think, having talked to some of the businesses in manufacturing and elsewhere, it's been interesting that when they have furloughed, 80% of their staff, they've taken the opportunities now to reconsider the way their plants operate and the way their businesses operate. And although that could cause some considerable shakeout in terms of job numbers, we are seeing increasing moves to digitalize more quickly, to automate more manual tasks at a faster rate than I think we probably would otherwise have seen. So I think opportunities, but some consequences as well for us there moving forward. Just to say, I think the vaccination, it has raised hopes of a turnaround in the pandemic, and I think there is real optimism now moving forwards. Household savings are for those in work and for those particularly in the professional services, housing savings doing very well. So I think we've seen a massive increase from quarter 4 2019 from 7.7% to 0.4% in just Q2 2020. So I think there is the potential for some pent-up demand and consumer boom, even if that is relatively short-term in terms of scale. But I think overall the outlook over the short term is probably weaker than expected, probably because of the shakeout and because of the economic scarring, and because of the partial responses around flexibilities for payback of loans or support to keep on staff not being quite strong enough to keep businesses afloat. So I think there's some real interesting dynamics in all of that. The strength of the recovery, I think, will vary across the sectors, but I think labour demand will remain weak over the short term, and we'll see subdued business investment and productivity growth. Just to say, as I've mentioned, the K recovery, I'm not going to go into all the debates between all the economists about the different shapes and everything, but I think there is a real issue underpinning that, in that it does accentuate the divisions that were already very apparent in terms of levelling up, and in terms of the divisions that the government is very keen to see reconciled within the UK and within our country. Moving on to the next slide, just to mention some of the key structural shifts that I think are identified as part of the opportunity is the increase in the prevalence of working from home, the impact on specific economic sectors such as hospitality, travel and international tourism, seeing lower growth compared to pre-COVID expectations, and I think that will be something that we will need to focus in on quite considerably, and an acceleration, I think, of online commerce growth. So in all of that, I think the dynamics around the debates that are going on between a new normal, bounce back, a green recovery, the rapid acceleration of those existing trends around digital automation, and the shakeout and scarring that is likely to happen in parallel. So that moves us into, are we going into recovery? Yes, I think the answer for GDP, but interestingly, the Resolution Foundation arguing quite vociferously that not for household incomes and living standards, that living standards will decline, especially for low-income households, as unemployment rises and benefits are reduced. So moving on, as you're very well aware, we've got work going on in terms of looking into the green economic recovery, and we've commissioned work by the New Economics Foundation, and the central tenets of that work are around improving living standards rather just simply targeting GVA growth. So I think something there about good growth and inclusivity, something around the creation of good, secure jobs, and also the sort of decarbonisation agenda and the opportunities to move to a much greener economic recovery as we move forward. So moving on very quickly towards the strategy is my final part of this presentation, and I think we've got some really interesting work going on that we need to bring into a single strategic framework, a single strategy, perhaps for Hampshire to take into account LTP4 priorities, the Hampshire 2050 initiative, the climate change strategy, the LET recovery plans and strategies, and our own skills strategy. And I think really increasingly important will be how we position ourselves in the queue with national government as national policy rolls out in terms of what the economic subnational system looks like moving forward, in terms of opportunities relating to possibilities arising from the devolution white paper, in terms of doing things at scale, that perhaps currently we're not doing as much at that Hampshire scale, making the most of all parts of Hampshire in terms of the M3, linkages, our connectivity with London, as well as the South Hampshire vision around, the marine and maritime economy. So I think some real opportunities moving forward. I'm not going to go into all of those philosophies, but we are looking at all the current thinking that's going on at the moment about the circular economy and good growth and those opportunities to make sure that all residents and businesses in Hampshire, are supported and part of our recovery processes. And then finally, to finish off, just something a little bit about some of the opportunities. The historic outflow of skilled labour from Hampshire to London may provide some opportunity to retain and attract both skilled labour to Hampshire, but also, if a lot of Hampshire residents are, reliant on employment in London, then some of those satellite offices could emerge in and around Hampshire, into the future. And more opportunities for less time spent travelling in and out and commuting into big cities, into those denser areas. So I think some opportunity for rural economies to really take advantage of those opportunities moving forward. Thank you. I'll end it there.
Thank you very much, Richard. Awful lot to take in. I don't know what's happening. I seem to have got a bit of feedback. I don't know where it's come from. I'm trying to get rid of it. Is that better? Steve, you had
yes. Thank you, Richard. One of the things that we often notice after a recession, and one of the things that's being predicted, is a growth in the number of small businesses, startups, from people who have been forced to give up their normal work. Do we have any evidence of that happening in Hampshire? Do you have any predictions? And if so, what could we do as a county council to help?
Sorry, I missed the very beginning of that question.
The question is about startup businesses. When we get recessions and people are forced out of their normal jobs, very often they start up their own small businesses, and the economy is helped to bounce back that way. So do you agree with that? Do we have any evidence in Hampshire, and can we do anything to help?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. In terms of business support and birth rates do tend to go up as a consequence. And I suppose it's then what happens in terms of the survival of those businesses and whether they get the support that they need to scale up and stabilise and move onwards. We have got. I mean, we've just been doing something on the Catalyst programme with the University of Southampton, where we will be supporting small businesses, and I think we need to create that incubator space, the innovation opportunities, and to encourage people where possible to start up their own businesses and give them the support we need. I have no idea at the moment whether the scale of the support that we offer is meeting that demand at the moment. What I would argue is, this goes back to how the county works, both with its districts and with the local enterprise partnerships, to make sure that we make the most of the sum of the parts, and that we're joined up, and we actually don't, just duplicate, the same initiatives in different ways in different places, but we try to scale up the intervention so that we get a bigger bang for the buck and make a bigger difference. So I'll be looking to do that when I review the sort of business support function that we have within our own economic development team, but also looking elsewhere as well at what the LEPs are currently doing and what the districts are currently doing, and are we doing that in a way that makes most sense for businesses to take up those opportunities.
Yeah, thank you. That's interesting and encouraging. I noticed that wasn't mentioned in the presentation. Probably couldn't get everything in, but I would like to see it featuring in whatever strategy documents we produce and future reports, if you think that's appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'll pick that up completely. Yeah, I'll pick that up and probably try to get too much into the presentation, and probably sometimes less is more, isn't it? But yeah, I will definitely pick that up.
Thank you.
Yeah, Keith, thank you. Wasn't a dissimilar question, actually. I mean, clearly we're keen on how we can support startups, but also on re-startups. I think there are a lot of businesses that just need a little bit of support now that they've gone. They've already been there once, they know their way around their business, and they just need that support now. In terms of, I think, incubator space, we're working with quite a few companies, one of them being IncuHive, and one of them has actually just opened up a whole new premises, working with IBM, providing that space. So we're doing a lot of work in that area already. But Richard, you've used the word quite a few times about opportunities. And it's always difficult, isn't it, at times like this, when people have really suffered for all sorts of reasons, to talk about opportunities. But we have to make sure that Hampshire is really well placed to take advantage of those opportunities that will clearly arise from this. And as I say that with a slight error of, nervousness about when people have suffered personally or through their businesses, that we need to look at it like that. But there's also lots of opportunities, and it can be quite exciting. I'm also interested in how we position ourselves right across the southeast and working with our partners as well, because I'm going to go back to that, that if you like, that making sure that we get that investment in the southeast so that we as Hampshire benefit from that as well. So there's a lot, there's an awful lot going on, and there's a lot of areas we've got to cover, but I'm just keen that we keep close to our partners as well.
Yeah, I mean, just to comment on that, I think the Cambridge Oxford ARC, that came out, last week or this week, I don't remember exactly, but the initiative with MHCRG leading that now, and the scale of that means that you're basically looking at something like a new powerhouse, really, with a big rail link running through the middle of it. And I think in terms of getting the attention of government, with the Midlands and the North also, having aspirations, for a long time now to make the case for, powerhouses based on, London and everything else. I think to get a look in, we have to think about scale. I think it's so important. Otherwise, I just think government is completely disinterested.
And if I may, Chairman, just also make a comment, and Ros might want to comment as well. Clearly, from that point of view, whether we get new startups or re-startups, is how we work with our colleges and universities in that sometimes reskilling, making sure we've got the appropriate skills for the future. And I know that's something that Ros, I think she's still on the call, I think she had trouble with her internet, might want to make a comment on, because, to take advantage of those opportunities, we've got to have the right skill base in place at the same time as well, which is going to be really important. And I remember speaking to Joy Carter Key some time ago at the university. I know she's going. We had the discussion, is the right degree courses being provided for the future that we're going to need for those skills as well. So it's an interesting thing. I think we do have a close relationship with our universities, but maybe that's something that we could build on, especially now, and especially in green recovery, I would have thought. I don't know if Ros, you want to comment? Keith, you're on mute, Keith.
Oh, Ros, there you are. Do you want to comment on that at all?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Rob, for those words. That's exactly it, isn't it? We have got amazing colleges and amazing universities, and it's about reskilling of our communities just as much as the ones that are just coming through their education. We've got some amazing assets in Hampshire. We've got outstanding schools. We have outstanding colleges. Our university, and the two unitary universities are amazing. So we need to really link into those and use them, and get those businesses to link into those as well. And for me, I had a conversation with Rushmore Borough Council yesterday about what can they do for our to reskill, to encourage those Hampshire local jobs, almost for local people, those high profile jobs, because in Rushmore we do have the Gulf Streams, we do have the BAE Systems, we've got some really amazing companies, and it's so important that those jobs on every single level within those companies are there for our Hampshire residents, and our Hampshire residents are filling those positions. And it's a whole, you know, flowchart almost of workings to get there, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll bring Stuart in a minute. I agree. I still believe, as you know, I've said this so many times on the LEPs, I get fed up with it. There's a disconnect between all the good stuff that the colleges are doing and what the firms want in terms of the skills. And somehow the LEPs, neither of them, I have to say, not the Enterprise M3, I don't think is any better than Solent, in actually understanding that fact. They all have their own agendas set, and they don't actually think about ensuring we've got sufficient skills for the jobs that are coming up in the future. I know, for instance, not through this particular, through the county, the Gulfstream have had huge problems getting the skills they want. Had they known what they know now, they may well not have come to Farnborough in the first place. That's how serious it was. But people don't talk about that. That's the sort of stuff we've got to stop happening in the future. And if we can act as a conduit for that happening, that must be important. Don't get me wrong, the Gulfstream work very hard, and so is the technology colleges and everybody else. But you don't find qualified maintenance engineers just like that for aerospace. They need a lot of licenses and a lot of training. And it's those sorts of skills. And if I have a concern, it is the fact that the furlough scheme hasn't been dynamic enough into encouraging those companies that have furloughed staff to use that opportunity to reskill, or to get them to reskill in those types of skills they'll need in the future if they want to stay working for that firm. But that's a bee in my bonnet I've had for some time. Richard, you may want to say something about that. I don't know.
Absolutely, I think that's right, and I think it was interesting in Lancashire. We set up an aerospace task force, you know, quite deliberately to retain talent as a result of the pandemic, because of the redundancies and job losses. We really needed to shift those into some of the growth opportunities. So the idea was to try and use the opportunity to retain that talent, but move it into the low carbon and energy sector, for example, where we set up different sector groups because there's a very differentiated impact. You know, as Councillor Humby says, it's really difficult to talk to one particular sector about opportunities. You know, it was impossible to have a conversation with the tourism and hospitality sector about anything other than survival and cash flow and reserves and those financial pressures. And it was just not appropriate to talk to them about anything other than that, you know. But at the same time, we were talking to energy and low carbon and having a dialogue that was extremely positive about, you know, whether net carbon 2050 should be reduced to net carbon 2038 or whatever, and they were concerned about whether they were going to be able to find the talent that they required from within the region to support their growth opportunities. And it was by linking in the aerospace issues so that we didn't just lose all that talent. In Lancashire, as you well know, you know, it's a massive issue. In Hampshire, it's probably not such a big issue, but retaining talent and even, you know, getting the high talent jobs is a big issue. So fully support what you've said.
Stuart, I saw you on the chat. We were talking about NHBC, amongst other things. Absolutely right. I think it goes further than that. I think we can see Hampshire as a place where people live when the company they work for is based the other side of the channel. Because if you've only got to go to Paris once a week or Brussels, why not live in a nice place like Hampshire rather than have to move to the continent? But Stuart, you had a point.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, I absolutely. I think one of the big opportunities is this reset of the traditional kind of workplace commuting and all of that, and the HSBC announcements just a really interesting example of how things are changing, perhaps. But the point I wanted to make really was to hopefully give you a bit of reassurance about the skills stuff, because I do agree with everything that's been said. It's so important. So it's very timely that yesterday Tritra and I had a workshop session with the New Economics Foundation about the work they're doing for us on green recovery. And we all agreed that actually the whole focus of that needs to be very much that the deep dive looks at skills, what the skills needs are for the future, and what the gaps are likely to be. So very much in that kind of Hampshire 2050 philosophy, trying to draw on the work that Nesta and other people did and say, well, actually, what are going to be the skills of the future, and how can we start now to begin to address that as part of the recovery? So I'm very optimistic that we'll have a little bit of an evidence-based framework to support the sorts of things that you and Councillor Humby and Councillor Chad have just been saying about the importance of knowing what the skills of the future are. And I think particularly that's also about skills that are likely to be more generic to economic sectors. So software engineers are going to have a role in a great variety of sectors, and very much in the way that Richard was just talking about aerospace, skilled people being able to kind of then, find a role in other sectors. I don't think we'll see the same traditional, these skills are specific to this sector. It's very much about that kind of thing that Nancy Wilkinson talks to the Hampshire 2050 Commission about what the skills of the future are, and how, if Hampshire's well positioned and has a talented workforce, we really do stand to benefit from the opportunities that exist. And equally, which I think is your point, Keith, if we don't have that skilled workforce pool, then we very much won't benefit from the opportunities. We will be one of the net losers.
Thanks for that. Okay. Anyone else got anything else to say?
Keith, I'd only just want to mention sort of, Richard's brand new in at the job. I'm very impressed at how quickly he's got up to speed with Hampshire, and how, having had a few meetings with him, how encouraging it is to hear how passionate he is about Hampshire already, in terms of what we've got. So I'm very impressed with that. So well done to Richard as well. So thank you.
Yeah, well, Hampshire's a very easy place to be passionate about. That's not meant to be a bad compliment.
I need to improve my IT skills, I think.
Yeah, but apart from that, you did okay.
You're well ahead of us on that, I can tell you. Okay, right. Well, you happy with the recommendation?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
Next, the presentation. And I think that's the end of the agenda, unless anyone's got anything else they want to mention before we shut up shop. And our next meeting of the briefing, will obviously, as I say, have an AGM this year, probably in the autumn. Would probably be a good idea, but we'll have obviously some more briefing meetings before then. Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.